So we're at a pivotal time with the pandemic in the United States, with the opening and closing. And one of the main populations that's impacted by this are college students who are seeking education. So I've received 4 messages from mothers who are updating me. I'm sure, Cora, I saw your face smile. You have something to say about this, I imagine, too. But I received 4 messages from mothers in this tension of these really capable children who fought so hard in high school to head into these big schools, who earned scholarships and who worked so hard and then are not succeeding virtually. Now, not only are they not succeeding virtually, they even have lost touch with why they're going, period. Or navigating the anxiety, navigating mental health, physical health, a lot of other challenges have come into play. And so they've lost whatever they bought into to work that hard to go get to the school. They checked that box. Actually, without the school, they are across the board falling in love and have other goals now. Ready to just go get a job and move up a ladder and not pursue a vision. And gap year, like wondering, so one of them took a gap year and now has lost, still doesn't have the mojo, and not even clear on whether attending one of these big universities is going to be a possibility. And a couple of, so there's 5 young people that I'm holding in our conversation today. And they're all making various choices, but it's all about this. I worked so hard for this, not able to have that full experience. I have no idea what I want to do now. And I'm not sure if you will be able to re-enroll me into the thing. And so the mothers are in this, yeah, Johnny's like, yeah. So the mothers are holding compassion for one level of like, we have to say, some said mental health is most important. So they adapted for the fall semester last year. Like mental health is most important. And then second semester, okay, we're improving mental health, but the patience is thinning because now we're in fear that it's like, how do we help them bridge the gap to that next level? Is this really what is going to get them into that best life? All of these things are being re-examined, and they're kind of reimagining what that future is now that there's been this blip, and there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. So that is the conundrum. And these young people are between 18 and 21 years old.
I now believe kids should take time off before they go to college. One, because they spend all their time going through this education system that many of them don't operate well in. And so to have a period of time where they can actually explore, who am I? Why am I doing this? What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Is huge. And I think it's such a beautiful thing. Like I was literally holding back tears because I wish someone would have told this to me. So as someone who applied to 10 Ivy League schools and went to Stanford, being 18 and going there, it's like you have an identity crisis because you do really well in your little pond, and then you go to this big place and you come to into community with people who have set world records and have 3 patents and have created a company at the age of 13. And so you're like, who am I? Who am I? So you end up going through this identity crisis, and they called it the Stanford Duck Syndrome. So everybody's swimming along, but really a lot of people are struggling. And it wasn't until I had my breakdown and was dealing with my mental health where I really got clear about what that picture looks like. And so when I talk to college students now or high school students now, I really try to advocate them having a more balanced approach as they're either continuing to go into school or as they're taking time to explore and figure out what it is that they want to do. I think it ends up freaking the parents out more than it does the kids, because the parents are like, I've had this plan for you to go to college. Um, and the kids are like, but I don't want to follow your plan. Your plan actually doesn't work for me. And so there ends up having to be this disruption that happens for the parents to see, wow, I have real thoughtful human beings who have a perspective of their own and who want to do things for their own. And maybe I should take some time to listen to them, because it's always been push, push, push. The other
Mm.
side of that, for these kids who are drivers, I think because high school is um, so focused on the pressure of getting into college and then getting into a good school, that people are just going through the motions for the sake of doing it. But it's not necessarily in alignment with, okay, why am I doing this? Is this good for my heart and soul, or is this just good for my brain and my future? And so I think for the kids, they end up doing this unraveling, or in the last year really helped kids unravel, like, oh, I need to sit down and really think about, why am I trying to go to Yale, or why am I trying to go to Stanford? Is that something that I want to do? Why was I working that hard? Because a lot of them end up doing 50 extracurricular activities and don't really enjoy the social experience of high school or college. And so I love hearing that someone is falling in love. I love hearing that someone is taking time to go explore these other things, because they get to enjoy their full experience versus just focusing solely on school and accomplishments.
So much of what you just said resonated with me, Donnie. And I really wonder, like, for the people, for the people who have kind of unraveled a bit, when once this opportunity has been kind of altered or taken off the table temporarily for them, I wonder how much of that direction really just came from the expectations of their parents, and how much of it was actually authentic. Because if it unravels like that, it was never real to begin with. That's how I've always experienced that. So at that age, I mean, take a few months. Don't beat yourself up. You haven't lost your drive. You haven't lost your ability. You haven't lost your desire and capability to win, because you got to where you got already. So once you have a direction, all of that's going to come back. The most important thing for these people now is to discover what their authentic direction is.
So my thoughts here kind of go on exactly what Donnie was saying and what Richard's saying. Who are they doing this for? Are they going through the motions just for mom and dad? And who do we need to relax? I think we might need to relax mom and dad. The world has changed greatly, very quickly. Not that it doesn't change every second, it's a whole new world. However, not so in our faces. So these kids, just when they think that they were getting some kind of plan in place, some kind of roadmap, if you will, the landscape has changed greatly. Everyone's kind of freaking out. There's a whole new way to go here. I think taking their time, I don't think there should be a rush here. I think taking their time is what they need to do. They need to stop and figure this out for themselves. Mom and dad, sorry, but we need to relax. We need to learn to relax.
Back off.
Know that they'll find their way, and you don't want them living a life you want for them. You want them living their life. So this love, let this love explore. You try to stop something like that, it doesn't happen. It doesn't, you know what I mean? So explore these things, maybe start encouraging options that includes some of these things. My daughter, here's a perfect example. My daughter scored very well on her high school. What is it, ACTs or yeah?
SATs.
As well, they did ACTs here in Michigan where I'm
Oh.
at.
Okay.
Here too.
Out of 36, she scored 34. At that point in time, Central Michigan University was after her. The physics department kept saying, please come. But that's not for her. School, college, that wasn't for her. She didn't want to do that. She'd had enough of it. You know what I'm saying? So it was very hard for me to let go of that for her, because I know just what that could have done for her life.
Yeah, I would say to the parents, like, you've got to learn to divorce your child's accomplishments from your own.
Yeah.
Right? Don't try and live vicariously through them. You'll just make them miserable. Back off and let them be.
I had an interesting debate. It was a debate with my dad when I was home, because for him and my mom, education was really important because it was their way of finding opportunities in the South in the 60s and 70s. And so there's all that behind it.
Yeah.
But we were having a conversation because he was asking me, oh, where do you want to go with your business? And do you want to go back to school? And I told him, no, I don't want to go back to school. If I have to go back to get a master's or a PhD in order for someone to see that I can bring value to the table, I'm not doing it. I said, and we were going back and forth for about 30 minutes. His whole thing was, that is how you get subject matter expertise. And my thing was, you can get subject matter expertise also from going through certifications and from doing the work day in, day out. And it was a very interesting conversation. My mom was just watching it. And afterwards I asked, did you understand that I wasn't saying that Dad was wrong about saying that you can get far with a master's or a PhD? And she said, yeah, you were trying to help him understand that there are many different ways to get education. And I think that's really important for kids now, because they can go on YouTube, they can go through certifications, they can go the traditional schooling route, they can go and get a job. And all of those bring different types of value. And so they're still going to get education if they don't go directly to school. And I think that's the thing that I really hope parents begin to understand is, like, we have to redefine what education actually means and looks like and put it in a broader bucket. Because now you're saying you're allowing your kid to figure out how they best like to learn and how they want to learn and what they want to learn. So you still get to guide them and provide mentorship and direct them. But now you're alongside them saying, hey, yeah, help me understand what this is and how can I support you there, versus, no, you need to get pushed down this traditional route and that's the only way to go. That's the only way you're going to make $1 million, blah, 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 blah. And I think if parents can have those types of conversations with their kids to say, hey, what does education actually mean for you now? I know it's been K through 12, you sit in the classroom or you sit in front of a computer for 7 hours and have someone spouting information at you and telling you, hey, you're gonna have a quiz. I'm a horrible test taker. I hate taking tests, but that doesn't mean I'm not interested in the information or I don't take in the information. So I feel like sometimes testing ends up putting more pressure on people who might not be good test takers, but then they go and they get a C or a D and they freak out because now they're like, okay, I only have 2 more exams and I can't screw either one of those up in order for me to pass this class, so I don't have to take it.
So, I definitely appreciate everything that everybody has said, and I do agree with much of it. But the truth is that there are some sort of economic realities. There are some or psychosocial things that young people are supposed to be doing at this time, at least the way Americans have been socialized to be young people, right? There are some benchmarks that they should be hitting at these ages, right? So one of the things that's happening, and we've seen this trend in this generation generally before COVID hit, is that they are failing to launch, right? I saw a statistic recently that said that almost half of all people 30 and under in this country still live at home. I mean, just put that into perspective, right? And we all come from a generation where most of us were out and on our own, somewhere between 17 and 20, right? We went to college and sort of never came back. That's not the reality of this generation, right? So that predated COVID. But now you've got this added phenomenon, right? Because this generation sort of loosely, they might go to college and then just come home and live there with their parents for the next, 5 years. That doesn't characterize our generation, right? But now when you add this COVID thing, they're not even going away to college, right? They're doing college also in their parents' homes. So one of the first things that I would say is, even if these kids continue to do home classes, they need to move out, right? So to the extent that families can, and I know that this is not a reality for all demographics, but to the extent that families can, they really should get these students their own apartments and then let them do their Zoom classes there, because that's an important part of their development. So now we've got students who are in their first and second year. We've got students who were at home for their senior year in high school, are now finishing their first year of college and are now going into their second year of college, and they're still living at home doing Zoom classes, right? So I would say they need to move out. They need to detach for developmental reasons, even if they're doing online classes. The second thing I would say is that, and as a professor right now who is teaching young people who are taking Zoom classes on their cell phones and their iPads, right? This is not a great learning experience. So what I would say is, to the extent that families can, and I'm aware that this is not a reality for everybody, they should have large monitors. They should have dedicated space, right? And they're not doing that. They're trying to watch classes. And I can see when they're on their cell phone trying to watch the class, right? Some of them are in their bed watching the class. They need a learning environment that kind of replicates the classroom, right? So if they can get a big screen monitor or a big screen TV where they can see people in life size and interact, and they can zoom in on the professor in a large size, right? These little things help, right? So I think these are some sort of practical things that can change the online learning experience for people. Now, that doesn't solve the question of whether or not education is still a good idea. But here's what we know about that. Even in 2021, the data still shows that lifetime earning potential is tied to education, right? So yes, there are a lot of substitutes for education, and they're fun. And we also are right now teaching a generation of students who all secretly think, well, if I weren't studying in class, I could be an internet millionaire, I could be an internet influencer, right? They're all, that is to them the substitute, right? That's the opportunity cost of being in class. For our generation, the opportunity cost of being in class was working on somebody's factory line, right? But they don't think of the alternative as working at McDonald's or working in a factory for the rest of their lives. They think the alternative is being a flashy internet influencer, right? And we all know that internet generations, right? The time from when you're like on top to when you're completely obsolete, these can be very short generations, right? To the tune of like 4 to 5 years, right? So they do, and given the way the economy is now, right? And I know this trend is changing, and that's what you guys are especially Donnie, that's what you're sort of harping on. Not harping, but that's what you're focusing on. There still is value in credentials, right? And the market still pays for them, right? So the question is it safe for students to separate from the educational process for a couple of years while they sort something out? Well, we have data about that too. The longer students are away from formal education, the absolute harder it is for them to come back ever in a meaningful way, right? And we see this with older students. When older students come back to school, whether it's back to undergrad, back to law school, back to whatever school, they have a lot of work and a lot of catching up, and it's harder, it's more expensive, it's the logistics are different, right? So when students are falling in love in lieu of going to school, that's also dangerous, because the process of being in school fundamentally changes us. So the person you fell in love with at 18 might be very different from the person that you would fall in love with at 22 after 4 years of having your ideas and beliefs and thoughts challenged on a daily basis, right? Your sense of self can be very, very different. I will say, as a professor, it is so much more enjoyable teaching older students, right? I mean, it really, really is. Like, they've seen some things, they know some things, they're not overreacting to every little thing, they're not totally entitled. So I don't know. So I think it's a big question, right? It's not just a question of can they read some stuff on their own. There are actually some developmental pieces that should be happening for them. So I don't know what the answer is, but there are some things that can be done. But do I think a gap year is a good idea? Sure, take a gap year. If you think you want to study science or math or English or whatever, in that gap year, do some self-study courses so that you know, right, for very little money, you can test your commitment to this area, right? For a couple $100s, you can test your commitment to economics. You can test your commitment to, you know, French literature or whatever it is before you come back and pay thousands for it. But I think young people should be in school, and they should be in college as quickly after high school as possible, but not doing it on their cell phones, right? It needs to be a serious educational environment.
I really appreciate, Corey, what you shared, both because I've launched 4 adult kids who have various, you know, one is an influencer and has made a substantial amount of money online. So my long conversation about that's not a career choice didn't go so well yet. But there's in this dance of like, for this particular group, it's like, where do these students, like, where do they go? What YouTube channels should they be following to help them get the information to make that decide? Like, I'm curious about that too. Like, where, like, so say one of these students was planning, actually 2 of them were planning to be doctors of different kinds. And so now it's like to stay anchored into that vision, whereas, you know, some kids know as a child, so they have so many years, that was the reason. But if it was a recent pursuit, it didn't make it through the pandemic, like what Richard was saying. It was just, you know, not fully vetted, that particular goal. And so what do you all recommend, or what are you?
The information they need is actually inside them, and they're only going to see it once they've learned to filter out all of their parents' expectations. Now, I mean, in terms of whether or not they should go to university, that's a separate issue. I absolutely 100% believe they should. Every conspiracy theorist nut job I know, not educated. Right? Every person who clings to a bunch of really questionable beliefs about things, not educated. You don't want to be one of them. You know, the people who have the best chance of understanding what's actually going on in the world and their place within it are educated, not because of any particular topic that they did a degree in, but because the act of going to university actually teaches you how to think. It teaches you how to analyze things. It teaches you how to be objective as you can possibly be while still being a human being. All of these are very, very, very important, indispensable things. But the important thing is, I mean, to be able to bring your A game to whatever you're doing, it's got to come from you. It can't be your mother's bullshit hang-ups about something that she never got to do. Okay? It's got to be what you actually want to do.
Well, Richard, you know, all the nut jobs think that educated people have been brainwashed by the system.
Yeah, I know. And like, I mean, they don't deserve to have a public opinion, and like they really should just shut up and go to whatever that social media app that Trump tried to start was that failed.
I'm going to push back on that for a moment, though. I want to push back on that. I mean, although yes, education can provide all those things. I did not finish college either. Christy and I think, are both in that space. So there are many other paths of learning without the institution. That, you know, so inside of there, and many of the highest conspiracy theory people I've run into, PhD galore. And so, you know, there's just that, you know, it's all in there. I don't want to make a generalization about that necessarily, because then it's like, now we're othering each other, and that moves into that, you know, the whole separation again. And so for these,
yeah,
you know,
I mean, it's
I agree with all of that, but I'm like, I think there's some space.
It's a matter of probability, though. You know, those who have been trained how to think and analyze are much more likely to be better at thinking and analyzing.
Yes, true, and critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So that's really what it comes down to. I mean, whether or not you actually ended up receiving your testament is quite irrelevant. But the fact that you attended classes and went through the process, you know, you probably pick up 90% of what's actually going to benefit you in life in the first 6 to 12 months of a college degree, right?
The framework.
The rest is just for that piece of paper, which is only worth something to you if it's a technical profession, like, you know, like law, right, for example. But it's that foundation in how to structure thought that is by far the most valuable thing, I think, that ever comes from education. Yeah. I mean, even from my education, yeah, I mean, okay, it taught me what the systems are. It taught me absolutely nothing about how to use them.
Yeah.
Right. You have to learn that by doing it.
I guess I'm going to use that roadmap again. So we kind of try to set a roadmap out. This is the destination. And of course, us with our experience, our knowledge of life, we understand that the straightest line is the shortest path. However, it's a map. You don't have to go straight. You can go off this way. So I guess suggesting to them is encouraging them to find their way to that same destination mark that you know, that the parents see for them as well. But there's got to be, like Corey said, she enjoys teaching older students, but that's because they've had a little bit more experience of the world, so they understand just how precious this education is. So they utilize it and use it more.
Yeah, it's a quality decision for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So taking this little time, this little breather, this is fine as long as you both sit down with the map. Sit down with that map. Here's the destination point. Here's where we're starting. Now this is how I would like you to go. But look, you can, if you want to climb over these mountains, whatever your journey is for you. You know what I'm saying? They do need a little bit of maybe some life experience under that belt before they start off on that. So
just to add to that, like, I mean, if we're looking at earning potential over the next, say, 40 years, I would say you would be much better off to become an electrician or a plumber than a lawyer or a CPA.
Yeah.
It's going to be a hell of a long time before there's a robot that can do a plumber's job or an electrician's job. We're maybe 3 to 5 years away from replacing a lot of the legal and accounting profession with a piece of software. Like, well, I mean, you've watched me do it, Kate. I've taken myself out of the equation as a financial advisor with Affinitive LLC.
Right.
The finance industry is shriveling and dying before our eyes, and it needs to. Like most of these industries, you know, they're bloated and they're going to be automated beyond recognition within a decade. Not so for welders and plumbers and electricians. They're going to have work as long as they live and are able-bodied.
So I was just going to say that is a big piece of it, Richard, that those professions are very much tied to the extent to which you are able-bodied. But there is this idea that the longer you put off formal education, on average, right? We all know of the 18-year-old billionaires and things like that. But the longer you put off education, there is a leap in your earning potential when you pick up sort of across time and across averages, right? We all know the exceptions in the cautionary tales, et cetera. But for example, in law, there is a post-JD salary that students come into law school making one price, one salary, and then within 3 years, they leap up and then they come out making a totally different thing, right? So every year that you postpone access to your post-JD salary has long-term repercussions in your retirement, right? So let's say you're able to increase your salary by going to law school by about $40,000 to $50,000. Every year that you put off that extra $40,000 or $50,000 becomes hundreds of thousands of dollars in your retirement, right? So there is that economic question. But I agree with you that there are lots of alternatives. But the physical trades are tied to your body, which means that you will wear it out, which means that there is value, right? Like there's a value to the wear and tear that you're putting on your body. So I don't know.
I think one thing that I want to add, and I've seen it with myself, and I've seen it just amongst colleagues, that when most people are 18 and 21, they're not thinking about retirement. That's just the reality of it. So they're like,
their parents are.
Their parents are, yeah. But again, that's where the tension comes between, you're trying to force me down your path. One, I'm not mature enough to see that yet, because I'm just trying to get through my day-to-day of what it means to be a high school senior or a college student. And so there are going to be some students who are thinking about the long-term earning potential. And then there are going to be a group of students who are like, I just want to enjoy my life. And I think right now what's happening, and I've seen it, this is what I was saying, I've seen it for myself. When I was first thinking about my career, I was like, how can I enjoy myself? Because I spend so much time not enjoying myself through my education. And now as I'm moving through my career, I'm like, oh yeah, it is good that I have a 401k. And I'm also 30 plus years away from retirement. And so even though I know it's something I should be thinking about, I'm still not thinking about it in the way that my parents think about it, because they're at retirement age. And so there's something that happens in the process where people begin to shift their priorities as they're looking at their earning potential. And I think with individuals who are in this age bracket, it's important for us to continue to seed the retirement conversation, but it's also important to give them the space to say, you know what, they're probably not thinking about it right now. Because one, it's too big of a leap for them. And so they're like, but I'm going to spend the next 40 plus years trying to build a career for myself. Like, I'm not really thinking about where that money's going to come from and how much I'm going to make, because they're looking for a different quality of life at this particular moment in time, not 40 years down the road.
Just let me summarize my advice in a couple of points. So I would say, first of all, back off and give the kids some space. Encourage that 6 to 12 month gap. I would also encourage during that time, make a list of 10 occupations that you would consider and give yourself freedom to be outside the square, and see if you can do 1 or 2 weeks of work experience in each of those things. Try on some different hats in this time. There's never going to be a better opportunity to do that. And at the end of that period of a few months or a year, whatever it happens to be, give it all you've got with your new direction.
I guess the idea here is to my suggestion is to stop parenting them in this process, but partner with them in this process.
I think my advice would be to begin road mapping the pieces of life that are important to them. So there's what do I want to do, or what type of work do I want to do? There is, you know, what amount of money is important to me right now? What does personal satisfaction and fulfillment look like, or enjoyment look like? And then what does good mental health look like? And those things will shift over a period of time, but at least if they can begin to get some ideas about what's important to them now and what they want it to look like in the future, it's going to help them create a more holistic plan for themselves as they build their career and move towards whatever it is they're looking for.
So the first thing I would say is, depending on the communities and the demographics from which this particular question has come, I would remind them, for a lot of people in a lot of situations, and I think Donnie alluded to this earlier, education really is their way out, right? Education really is an equalizer, except when it comes with tremendous debt at high rates and things like that, right? So if you can figure that problem out, education can literally change the entire trajectory of your entire family, right? So I would say keep that in mind, okay? The other thing I would say is that it is a well-established fact, even though the majority of Americans in this country don't have a college education, that it is a big influencer on people's self-esteem in middle age, right? There are some people who don't get a degree and it never lets go, right? They never get over that they never got this degree, right? It gnaws at them, right? So it does affect people's self-esteem and people's self-concept, even though, like I said, the majority of Americans do not have degrees. The data does still show and the trend is sort of leveling out a little bit, but the data does still show that education is valuable in terms of long-term earning potential. But here's what I will say. If you decide to keep doing education online classes and things like that, change the setting, right? Make it an enjoyable, bright setting with big screens and a comfortable chair. Make those investments, right? Don't take classes on your cell phone. Don't take classes on your 12-inch laptop. And for the personal development, if parents can afford it, students should move out the same way they would move out if they were going to these big universities, right? They should get their own apartments. And if they decide to take a year or two off, whether they've already enrolled in college or not, like Richard was saying, they can use that time to test out different ideas at a lower cost before they make the big investment, if it's the right thing. So I agree that mental health needs to be taken into consideration. COVID has just exacerbated the types of existential crises that college students have anyway. And that's what college is for, right? College is for going through and surviving an existential crisis without mommy and daddy around, right? College is for figuring out how to hang out with your friends when you don't have any money, right? College, that's what college is for.
Socialization, yeah.
Socialization, right? Learning to solve your own problems, learning to do your own laundry, right? So those things you can't really substitute for them if they're sitting in their childhood bedroom on a laptop watching some professor in a different state.
And I would add to that it's a great time to harvest skills for hard work, entrepreneurial skills. If you can develop those entrepreneurial skills, it will accelerate your ability to get the most out of that education and solving some of those problems. So like there's this whole thinking set of being a self-starter and these habits that will help them further down in the career. And so if there is a gap year, working with a mentor, understanding yourself and your strengths, and learning
those habits that will make you able to achieve anything, whether you have an education or not. Getting some good mentors during the season is so important. Mentors that aren't parents.
Yes,
really important. That's awesome. Any other affirmations that you would say? What do you want to tell this next generation? Any affirmations? We closed our last call with that. for some of these write-in responses, and it went very well.
I would say that these young people, they will be fine. They'll be fine.
You will be fine.
Regardless of what they do now, they will be fine.
Okay.
I think there's something in this generation, and this generation my nephews are in, where they are incredibly kind and thoughtful human beings. There's a level of healing that's happening amongst that generation, and a level of new awareness that's happening in that generation.
Absolutely.
And so my hope is that you continue to be thoughtful as you continue to build your life and build your career, and help create whatever our shared future is supposed to be.
I would like to tell them, remember, you're not already defined. You're defining yourself as you go. You're not already in a box and prepackaged. And it's okay to make your own package.
Yeah, messiness is part of the process.
Absolutely, yes.
I would also just add that no matter what you decide to do with regard to education or career, or education in a formal setting, probably one of the most important things you can do for your future is to become good at learning. The ability to quickly acquire new practical skills is something that you are going to need a hell of a lot more than your predecessors did.
So good. Thank you all.